Welcome back to another One Thing. I'm your host, Neil Bauer. I am joined as always by Kim and Jody of ePayments, Fresh Approach Payments. Anyways, today we have a great guest, somebody I am very, very excited to talk to. But Jody.
Absolutely. Well, I am really excited to introduce our next guest, Tracey Zimmerman. Tracey is an incredible leader. She's the CEO of a very cool tech company. She's a visionary, and she's a mother of 7. She is really that woman that does it all. And I am so excited for our audience to get to know her a little better and hear all of the knowledge she's going to share today. So with that being said, Tracey, will you be so kind as to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on?
Hey, thanks, Jody, for the intro. I mean, you summarized it pretty well. I'll wave to everybody. I know there's a lot of controversy around the Zoom wave. Do you guys Zoom wave?
I do.
Zoom wave. I mean, it's nice. It's friendly. People on Twitter are jerks. But anyway, so yes, I have 7 wonderful children, some of whom might be coming home soon, so we might get to hear them. 2 of them are grown up and out of the house, so I have 5 at home. So I'm very fortunate. I've been a mom, it feels like all my life. And I also am a CEO of a company called Robots and Pencils, and it's a very fun company. I've been with the company for 6.5 years. I work closely with the founder CEO for the first 5 years as the president, and then I took over as CEO last year. And it's been a very interesting year and a half to transition into a role like this with the pandemic and things like that. But I think every day I feel like my brain's stretching a little bit because, you know, all the things you would do normally, you have to then put them through yet another creativity filter and another sensitivity filter. But, you know, I mean, it's going well. I mean, the vision is to create a great place for people to work and really fulfill their potential. And, you know, that's work that will never be done. It's like raising 7 kids. That's never done either. For people with young kids, it never ends. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, do you feel that during COVID that everything, because I know you do a lot with AI and everything, do you feel it accelerated because of, you know, everybody going remote, or do you feel it was already gathered momentum?
Well, I think what happened in the beginning of COVID, it was just a sudden stop, you know, because especially the larger companies, they're like, oh my gosh, we have to give everybody Zoom, you know, so there was definitely a few months of people. And of course, remember in the beginning, they were like, oh yeah, we're shutting down for a couple of weeks. Right. Yeah. And so, you know, in the beginning, people were kind of like, okay, well, we'll make it work. And then, you know, another few weeks go by and they realize you have to really put in a real disaster recovery or online, you know, collaboration plan. And so I actually think in some ways it accelerated some things and slowed some down. So early on, I think it was let's use the packaged products that are in the marketplace and roll them out, you know, and people were like, have you ever heard of Slack? And it's like, yes, we run the company on it. You know, we have for years. But I do think that then it tipped, you know, as people kind of caught up to that in the first kind of couple of quarters. And one of the things I keep saying to people is that we're in the middle of an involuntary digital transformation. Because, you know, I mean, we're in the middle of a digital transformation. It might have been voluntary or involuntary for different companies and industries already, but the pandemic made it now you have no choice. So I do think it accelerated things just in general. And it also helped people to understand the criticality and the importance of having those tools and being able to serve your customers and communicate with your team and run your company, you know? Right. So yeah, I do think it accelerated things. But at first I would say, it was just, I don't know, I think people were in shock and awe, you know?
I'm not going to be the first to ask you the one thing, but it's something that I was very, very excited to see. And I can't even remember where the quote comes from. It was on your site. Robots and Pencils excels at running with our ideas, even as we're still fleshing them out, finding solutions that fit our team's needs while helping achieve the vision. So I don't know who said it. I'll attribute it to you, but it
wasn't me. It was my client. That's not the kind of thing you wanted. I didn't say it. That was a quote from my client.
So that is exactly what we've been living through for the last 15 to 18 months. And to hear that, it's like solving those solutions, you have to be running. Whereas before, projects would be we have a project, we have a budget, we have a timeline, we have a Gantt chart, we've got to hit these milestones. Now it's you're doing all of that while on the back of a moped on your way to another meeting or on your way to get another COVID test. So the world's changed.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because that quote was from somebody who was in a startup environment as a client, but it turned into all of a sudden that's everybody's world. That's really what happened, right? And I think that we did well because we're used to working with startups, a very agile environment, and that kind of, and then all of a sudden, like I said, everybody's working that way. And it's not as easy to do it inside of large enterprise either, right? Like you have a lot more, liability and compliance and risk and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, for sure, it's happening to everybody now, not just startups.
Yeah. I'm going to go back and backtrack to my one thing that I was going to ask about. And it's interesting that we're on this train about the pandemic because it has changed our world so drastically. And I think the meaning of work and balance with home has definitely changed for all of us. You're someone I really admire and look up to in this category because, like I said earlier, you do it all. And I'm like, I think if anything you can bring to our audience is some advice. You're like one thing that gets you through balancing it all. And I know you do it not just in your own home, but with your company of really putting the importance on both. So what is the one thing you would share with us on making that successful?
And one thing I'll say is I don't necessarily like the term balance because it kind of implies something that never actually happens, right?
True.
It's kind of like, what do you focus on and like letting some other things, simmer or potentially fire or fail, but catch fire, but maybe not spread, but in terms of like, prioritization and stuff, I think the one skill that you can develop is really being able to do good trade-off management and do it quickly. I was kind of joking earlier, and you guys know, like you make a list of things you want to get done and, you write down 18 things and you look at the end of the day and you're lucky if you got 3 done because a bunch of other things, entered into the list. And so, but, kind of continuously evaluating that. It's something, you'll never arrive. I'm not saying I'm always right, but that really goes across all of life.
Right.
And I think because I entered, I was a very young mom, I entered tech very young and I entered digital and I was like working from home when I was 21. And like, so it's just many years of working like this. And then, tech by its nature, I mean, now you have continuous deployments, all that stuff, but it didn't used to be like that. Like you had to get up at 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. for deploys, and maybe it takes all night because the infrastructure guys are like sleeping or something. And so you learned like you have to kind of switch between things quickly and then, manage your priorities. So I think a lot of it is, whether it's your personal life, your family, your kids, you have different needs at different times. And I think it's really important at work. Like I look fondly back to my days when I was like, back when I was like a developer or something, people talk about like inbox zero. I'm like, I literally like, I'd be a full-time job if all I did was like answer my emails so I could get to inbox zero. I'd never get anything done. And it's just like, you actually just have to more and more, like you have to prioritize. And that means some things will fall by the wayside, but you have to get comfortable with that. So I really think that kind of trade-off management, like what really needs my time and attention now, what can be delegated. Like we run a lot of systems, we do quarterly planning and those types of things that really helps to focus on a quarter theme, but it's day in and day out. Sometimes it's like, in the hour,
I love that. And I think we always tease like our middle name has became pivot. Like you have to learn to pivot quick with your business and life in general, but that is an art that you have to learn for sure. So, and you've done it very well.
Well, thank you. I mean, you can always look back and see what you could have done differently. But the best thing you can do is like learn, and do things differently. But it's interesting running a business like, in the digital world, like you put together like a 10-year plan. It's like our world could change so much in 10 years, and even 3 years. When you think about the service arts, like we have these like overarching things like, the name Robots and Pencils is really about bringing the sciences and the humanities together. I believe that will never change, right? Because even if you think about, okay, what really happened in the pandemic, you needed the sciences side. So you needed like Zoom and tools and collaboration and Slack and all that kind of stuff. Maybe documentation of process, but you also needed the humanities side, which was the human side of, like an example of one thing we did that I never thought we'd keep doing was we started doing a weekly all hands. So we went from doing like quarterly or maybe like once a month. It wasn't like, it wasn't something we were really good at. And then every single week, because like you realize like the human beings on the Zoom, like you need each other, it was a crazy time and we kept doing it also.
Isn't that so true? We've talked about that too, Tracey, that like nothing beats the human connection though. We've talked about when we were both, I know we talked over the pandemic, like being stuck at home and not being able to travel. And you just can't get that same relationship over a Zoom call. So that human factor always plays back in, and getting to know each other in person.
It's hard. And you have to it's like, as you know, you guys are, doing, like, we're all operating in similar environments. Like, you have to do the best you can.
Yes.
And like I said, it is like another filter that just makes everything a little bit extra challenging, and another additional learning experience that you didn't necessarily, that's your involuntary learning experience to go with the involuntary digital transformation.
I love that word.
Well, and where you were saying too, like, think about how much things will change in 10 years. Since we were out actually traveling recently again, there were people we thought we had seen 6 months ago or maybe a year ago. And it's like, oh no, it's been 2 years. It's been 2 years, because it's just a blur. Everything's so accelerated. Weird. Yeah.
I think time has been weird since the pandemic. Don't you guys?
I do too. Oh yeah.
Abstract.
Yeah.
I used to be able to gauge my experience. My life is around game consoles. Like, I know when my kids were born, because that was when the PlayStation 3 was out. Like, I have milestone markers because I remember the launch of those systems. And the same thing in business, I remember by shows that I would go to, whether it be PAX or whether it be Electronic Entertainment Expo. I'm like, I've got all of those things. Now that I don't, I've had the same exact issue. It's just like thrown my ability to time and context into torpor. So
it just is weird. It wasn't like it just disappeared. Actually, sometimes it seemed like each day was like a month too, especially early on. It just felt like being in a weird twilight zone. But yeah, no, I mean, being able to mark time from that, I don't know. It's just strange. I do think it's funny, Neil, maybe it's a mom versus a dad thing, but I mark other things that happen by my kids being born, not my kids being born based on like when game consoles released, but fine, no judgment, like not judging. I'm totally like that. I'm like, well, I know I was pregnant with Esther then, so blah, blah, blah. Or that was like when I remember I was carrying Abby in the sling, so it must have been sometime around, next year,
That's so
funny. Do what you can.
I'm blown away, first off, that you still have 5 kids in the house. Like, that is something right there that makes you a CEO, like across any vertical, whatever one. You manage all those timelines. It's astronomical. And like you said, you do not like the term balance. I've been chomping at the bit to get this one out. I hate getting back to normal. Hate that terminology.
I don't like that either. Yeah.
Because they're like, normal is never good for somebody who's like, I'm always trying to push the envelope, whether it be with graphics or technology or getting people moving forward into different areas that aren't, just to open up their minds and to new opportunities. Normal is not good. So when I went to look up like information on you, I went to Robots and Pencils and I saw that you had a great tag. It's the next normal. And I think that is a great way of looking at it. It's like, let's build something and get used to building something new to build for the next. And so I love that. And so I want to get my one thing here, because again, I know that you have kids coming home and I just wanted to be like diatribe all day. Well, you'll have part 2, you'll be back on. My one thing is like, how do you position, like if somebody was coming into like a non-pandemic person, because we've all lived through this, what's the one thing for somebody looking to create their next normal? The one thing that you would tell a company or person or individual to be aware of as they move into this is like, hang on tight? Is it to be like, it's a lot longer than you think? Like, what's your one thing for people moving into their next normal?
Yeah, that's a great question. What we've done with the pandemic and stuff has been very reactive. Like, yes, all of a sudden all my kids were home. And yes, I also had COVID and at the same time. And so there wasn't a bunch of family bonding going on. There's actually like texting going on from bed, like, bring me water. Did you do your homework? The honor system, So I think that there's an interesting opportunity. Actually, it's going to sound like maybe typical, but to kind of step back and reflect. It's kind of like, when you build software, you build games, you do a retro, like a retrospective, when you're doing this work. So I think taking the opportunity to say kind of like what's working and what's not, and trying, I think it's important, I got into journaling this last year. I don't know. I feel like, I don't know, is this midlife crisis content or something like that, but, but just to not judge what you actually feel and take the time to reflect and see what is working and what isn't, because, there definitely got to be a point where I was like, okay, we're bonded. It's fine. I have to get out of here. Like, I actually think they talked to Jody at some point somewhere around that time. I was like, I am literally going to go crazy, you know? But I think to like really think about, okay, what are the things, what is it about that you value? Is it actually like teaching the kids stuff, or is it just that is it because they get exposed to your work? Is it because, you know, you can always have maybe family dinners are easier and then you go back and work later. And obviously some people are certainly have different types of jobs than we do, that we can sit in front of our computers and do them. So it's a lot more challenging. But I would say that like, take the time to do a retrospective, what's working, what's not working, and, you know, have that discussion and share with the stakeholders in your life, like whether it's your, you know, your team of direct reports or your spouse or your kids. Also, I mean, you guys, you can have very interesting conversations with kids when you ask them this kind of stuff too.
Yeah.
Especially if they've been listening to you on Zoom calls for a year and a half, like, well, my perspective is this. And I'm like, you're 7.
Yeah.
I think you really kind of not judge it and then go and like kind of rebuild your next normal from there, Neil. I mean, we came up with that terminology. Like we're like you, right? So we're always trying to like push the envelope and, hey, let's be innovative and be creative. But I think people crave a normalcy. You know, so I think really thinking about what even if normal's different, like taking that time, what have you learned in the last year and a half? What do you want to try to keep doing? What do you want to stop doing? What do you want to start doing? And think about what you need to do in your life.
Yeah. The whole
idea of
Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where people need security as their base. Like I'm all for a normal, but not the normal that's been there. Because again, we mentioned earlier, which may or may not be cut. This is going to be terrible to edit, me saying all this. I apologize to future me. If normal wasn't ever challenged or pushed, you know, we'd still be like living in the world of Mad Men or living in the world of the cotton gin or like these things that need to be evolved beyond where we're at.
Right.
So, yeah, totally. Thank you for I took a long way to get a very short distance. So thank you.
Question, right? Well, and so with that being said, I have my question. My number one thing is, we were on a vacation recently, and my older daughter, who's 15, said to me just randomly, "God, Mom, I just realized that you're an actual person."
Oh, good. She's young for that.
So like the fact that she even said that, because I don't think I realized that till I was in my 30s. You know, and I had kids and was like, oh, wow, okay, my parents were actual people. So I would love to know you, Tracey, not the mom, the CEO, like what fuels you and feeds your soul?
Yeah. Oh, that's a really nice question. And by the way, I was more like you. I was definitely in my 30s because my mom was like kind of perfect, like very sacrificing. I think was part of it. My kids are probably like they're like 3 and they're like, she's definitely a person. But anyway,
she's a human. She has needs and preferences and everything. Totally. And I think when that clicks for them, it's like, oh, you're not just there to serve their every need, right?
Right. Well, plus when you're a mom, I think you're like at some point you're just going to suddenly know what to do like your mom did. And then you're like, okay, my kids are graduating from high school. Maybe that just never happens. And you just have to figure it out along the way, like everything else. Right. But I mean, for me, I'm a total people person. So I'm very energized by people. And new ideas too, Neil. Like I like brainstorming sessions, especially with other smart people. I feel tremendously blessed and lucky to live a life where it is actually my job to do what I love. And I kind of hate saying that, although I do have one of these do what you love things in the background. Yes. But you know, I obviously love people. I had a lot of kids, but I like that creative problem solving part. And I would say too, one of the hardest things through the pandemic, one of my things I keep saying is like, it's like all the hard stuff about work stayed and all the fun stuff went away. Right. And that's part of like, like low level depressed all the time. It's like, you know, you still have like, oh, we have to like do the proposals and do the work and do the hard thinking, but it's like the long fun dinners are over. The events are over, you know, like just even like, you know, walking the streets of busy cities and even like having multiple people, like maybe you get a dinner with somebody, but you're certainly not getting a dinner with 8 people.
Right.
So I definitely missed that part. So I would say that's like one of my biggest challenges is it feels like the parts that were really fun that fuel me, you know, they're a lot more challenging to have.
Well, you have to make it happen. Like I know Jody and I were even talking about how because of COVID and you've had to pivot so many different times and, you know, that we forget to celebrate as well, the little things or the monumental, you know, there's a monumental, but sometimes it's just celebrating the little things, you know?
Yeah. And actually, I think you actually need to be way more intentional and you actually need way more as volume because on like the average thing that people are like kind of hearing about or is happening, like honestly, like it's mostly negative. And it doesn't help that now people have more time, they're sitting in front of their screens and they're reading the news, which honestly, like, I mean, I was there, like the world has probably always been terrible. We just didn't know, right? Like, remember there was always like the kid that would go in the library and like read the international newspapers. Like I was not that kid, right? So we just didn't know.
Either.
You know, now it's like we all see it all the time. And so I think it's everyone knows the news sort of has a negative bent. So I think that, you know, when you look at that, it's not just celebrating, but it's like doing way more than, you know, you might think, and being far more intentional. Everything requires more intention now. Like all the things that come naturally, like, oh yeah, we're like, I was actually at the office with a few of my teammates this week, which was amazing, right? But all the like, oh yeah, I'm going to Starbucks. You want me to grab you something? It just naturally happens because you're like a nice human. Like you have to like, oh, I guess now that I talked to Jody, I could send her a Starbucks gift card. Thank God for the digital revolution, but you just have to be way more intentional. Like that's not in our DNA yet. And honestly, like let's really have to become the only way we interact, you know?
Yes.
Wow, that is so true. Yeah. No, it's true. Definitely. And you know, and I love what you said about how you are scaling innovation. And I thought that was really cool because I think prior to this, I always heard the word scaling. You have to scale properly. And I was like, that's just jargon. What are these people talking about? And then as our businesses have even exploded and everybody's growing in different ways, we're like, oh, you have to have the ability to scale. It's a thing, right? It's a thing.
Right.
And because you're behind the scenes with all the you know, different pieces working, and I know you started out as a developer and everything, what do you think we and our audience would be the most surprised to know about you?
Yeah, I think the thing that would probably be the most surprising is how much in reality, everything's actually about the people. Like people think it's about the technology, and it is, but and in some ways technology is the means to the end, although it's very important. But if you have to take care of the people that are building it, and you have to create an environment where, you know, they can do really good work. It's like, it's innately actually creative, right? Which it makes it really challenging. And you guys know this too. And like running tech, you all know this, right? Because it's kind of like the classic, like, okay, how long is this going to take? And developers like, leave me alone. I'll tell you when I'm done, you know? And it's like, because, you know, nobody's being unreasonable, right? Everyone needs a shipping date. You know, one of my things I say to, you know, the engineering team's like, okay, I know story points and t-shirt size, but the world runs on clocks and calendars, guys. You know, we got to figure out dates, you know? But I also deeply appreciate it is a very creative endeavor when well done. And you can tell when it's not creative, right? And so it's, you know, particularly when you're really making the solutions. And then even when it comes to like, for example, like rolling out more packaged projects or putting together, you know, products and implementing tools together, it still takes problem solving that takes creativity. And again, that's what like uniquely human pieces of what we do. So I think people would be surprised how much it's really about the people and providing like an environment where it feels safe for them, because actually innately there's a lot of failure, right? I mean, you know, like you're building stuff and like the nature of like debugging code or trying designs or, you know, doing testing and users don't like stuff, you know, it's like, this is a great idea. You should love this user. Could you understand it? But like, you know, so the people part is incredibly important. I think people would, maybe they don't think about that at the first glance. So
the humanity, hence the pencil, right?
Right.
Right. The pencil. I'm on the pencil
side. And that's the people side. Yeah, that's like the people side of what we do in terms of building the work, like and rolling it out to users and stuff like that. But for the whole company, it's actually all of the people, right? But yes, it's the penciling of the, because like, I don't know, it's tough times for people, you know, it really is. And what I've noticed too, and I'm interested in the three of your perspective, even for people who are not necessarily having tough times, really, like my team all kept, you know, they kept their jobs, we still, you know, and kind of safe environments and all those kinds of things. But there's just people feel their loved ones or even people they don't know. So it's just, again, people are into emotional, again, maybe because I didn't quit social media like you did, Neil, and reading too much news. I don't think it helped. Actually, I think you guys doing this is I'm so grateful for it. Not just, I'm thankful to be on it, but even just watching your other ones, it's like, actually, I hope you get a bunch of eyeballs just because everything's so negative. And I get it. Like, you know, I spent some time in MarTech. I understand how it works. It like grabs the eyeballs and the attention, but people need the energy of knowing like, actually, there's a lot of good people out there that are trying to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
I love that.